Hola mis muñequitas! It's been a while since I have made a tutorial and sorry in advance if I sound a little weird. I got braces, so yeah. But I actually am doing a collab which I was running very behind on, so I'm not doing my usual intro. But here I am. It is a sexy video game character collab. This is all by, his name is Akin. I want to thank him so much for including me in this collab. He had it open so that we can ask to join and I joined because I thought it would be so cool, and I've been looking forward to do Megaera from Hades for a while now, so I took that chance and I ran with it. Please make sure to check out everybody's video in the collab. I will link it all below and I will show you a preview of some of their dolls now. Look how good our dolls all look together. I'm so glad to have been a part of this collab alongside so many other talented artists. So please, like I said, check them out, follow, subscribe, interact with their content, and I hope you enjoy the video. Megaera is one of the 3 Fury sisters in the video game Hades. Hades is a roguelike action dungeon video game developed and published by Supergiant Games. Meg is one of the Furies sent by Hades to stop his son, Zagreus, from escaping the underworld. Zagreus has to defeat Meg at any given attempt to escape the underworld before advancing to the next level. Looking at Meg's character design, you can see that obviously she's a baddie, okay? She's got a lot of the gold armor, obviously, to protect her and, you know, these battles. She also has a wing. I really love her design, and I'm just going to basically take this and break it down to its core elements and turn it into a BDSM type bondage looking thing, except for with chains, because like Rihanna said, whips and chains excite me. So without further ado, let's get started on prepping the doll. So for this doll, I'm taking Apoxie Monster High head and putting it on a DC superhero girl body. I feel like this body is a much more muscular build and it'll be easier to build off of and add muscle to without making it look bulky and like a pillow. Here, I'm just doing basic doll prep. I am sanding down the body to make it as smooth as possible so anything I do will just look better and cleaner. Monster High heads have a much smaller neck and also smaller hole for the neck to go into. So here I'm just widening up a hole, and I will also be dremeling down the neck so that way it can slide in and not look ridiculously thick. Ta-da! Aquí no pasó nada. It looks completely normal and in proportion. Apoxie does have some indented designs on her face that I will be covering up, and in order to do that, I'm going to be opening the inside of the head to put some epoxy on the inside so when I'm sculpting, it doesn't collapse in on itself. Megaera also walks around barefoot, not in any shoes, so it feels appropriate to fix that high-heeled stance and make her feet flat. Here I'm just using some chopsticks to put it inside the leg so that way it'll have more structure and it won't just pop off. Before I start sculpting, I sketch some abs so that way I will have a guide when I start to sculpt. I'm going to be honest with you, the abs were so hard to actually do. I just went very little by little in little balls and then flattened them out and using a lot of water to flatten them out. It was very hard because I also don't have any sculpting tools. It was just me and inventing whatever I can use to get into the tiny little ab crevices. I make sure to build up very little by little because like I said, I really want that kind of like side boob fold to be there and some nice cleavage, so I go super slow and of course wetting my finger to smooth it all out in the process. Now, most people tend to shave down Apoxie's head to get rid of the engraved markings on her face, but I didn't want to lose the cheekbone and the thickness of her face. I feel like Megaera has a very, broad body build and face, so I just decided to build it up and sand it down later. To avoid cracking the face while I'm sanding, I put some epoxy on the inside as well. Because I want to add a lot of muscle to this doll, I do have to sand in between just to keep it clean, because once I keep adding epoxy, it's going to get harder and harder to sand down these surfaces. I also decide to widen out the hips and the butt because she is a very muscular woman, and having a thin body as a woman who is fighting people constantly is just not realistic. Meg's key weapon is her whip, and of course if you are yielding a massive whip, you have to have arm strength, so I really wanted to incorporate that with some extreme muscle. Now, did I get to do the whip? No, but we're gonna ignore that, okay? We're gonna pretend like I had a chance to do the whip, okay? As per usual, I did lose some footage, so you don't see me bulking out the leg, but here is the finished muscly result. Here's a side-by-side of my sculpt versus the original DC superhero girl doll sculpt. Before painting her, I decided to trace her so that way I can cut out all the armor she has on that I will be making with Worbla. I do this because Worbla will get hot and will peel the paint. In order to get a mold, I cover her in masking tape and I start to draw the design of the armor onto her, and then I cut it out and I trace that onto Worbla. I use my heat gun to heat up the Worbla, and then I mold it to the shape of the neck and the chest of the doll. For the shoulder pad portion of the armor, I use a marble in order to assist rounding it out more, as the shoulder is really not that round. I use the same masking tape method in order to get the mold of the shin protector armor that she has. Out of Worbla, I again cut out the shape of the forehead armor, or the diadem, I don't know what to call it, and I mold it to the shape of her forehead. To paint her body, and in order to sand it later, I use some gesso and then I mix in a little bit of blue acrylic paint. I also want it to be as smooth as possible, especially on the face, so I do add a little bit of water and I go in very, very thin layers and a lot of layers. Now that she's perfectly painted, I've let her dry for 24 hours. It is time to sand, and sand very gently. I use a nail sander for this, and I just buff her out until I'm happy with the smoothness of her face. Once sanded, I start the face up. I start out with the blue and I start to do her eyeliner. I really wanted to stay with the dramatic eye look that she has and the stylistic look that they keep. I wasn't going to draw all these black lines on her face, but I wanted the eyes to be very cartoonish and have that very dramatic winged eyeliner and eyelashes. Meg's character is very edgy, so I did want to keep that, and so I gave her like a little smirk because she is also a little bit of a flirt. So I gave her this kind of like almost like mean girl playful look. I hope that it translates. For Meg, she is obviously not a being that is alive, so I contour her face and her entire body using a mix of blue and gray. I also want to make sure to enhance all of the muscles that I sculpted because obviously you can still see them, but painting the body of all one shade just kind of washes it out a little bit, and I really wanted it to pop because again, she is a muscly woman. We cannot forget it, and I will not let you guys forget it. I forgot to mention, but obviously when I was sculpting, I was looking at reference photos of like bodybuilders, and throughout shading, I did the exact same thing. Between layers, I obviously spray her with the iconic Mr. Super Clear, and now that I am happy with the eyes, I go in finally with the black colored pencil. Once I'm happy with everything, it's time to go in with paint to just brighten and also darken parts of her face. Even though Meg is not a character that is alive, I still decided to blush her on her chest, her elbows, her butt, because blushing is something that happens when we are embarrassed, when we find someone attractive, so I felt like that kind of added to the sexy vibe. I also go with some acrylic paint and a toothpick to give her a little glisten in her eye. Using this gold chain, I will be creating a type of bondage bustier thing. I'm really not sure what they call it. You'll see what I mean. And for this, I am using resin to adhere it to the doll. When I'm happy with the placement of the chain, I just cure it with my UV light. Going little by little, I start to cut the chain and also use these golden loops to start creating the bondage that I want to create around her chest. In the character design, Meg does have a sort of toga-like design on, which she does have it draping onto one shoulder and off one side of her chest. So I really did want to incorporate it and keep that. So I used it to cover one side of her chest, and unfortunately I did lose the video clip for this, but I also put on like a type of sleeve droop side thing. Little by little, and using a chopstick, I take some glue and I adhere the gold chain to the body so it starts to actually look like bondage. Then I take the pieces of Worbla that I originally molded to her body and I start to glue them on and adhere them to her. I do heat up the Worbla slightly so that way it'll adhere to the other pieces of Worbla more easily. Once all the Worbla has been placed on the body, I start to put on some UV resin onto the Worbla so that way I can cure it and add some chrome powder so it could start to look like real gold. Honestly, this was my first time we're using resin and working with chrome powders, and I'm obsessed. It looks so good. The toga-like outfit she has on also has like a type of skirt thing, so I decided to incorporate that as like a super mini skirt. So I just cut up some fabric and I start to glue some artificial folds in there to kind of keep that folded extra cloth type look. To keep to the sexy look, I decided to give her a high-rise gold chain thong that will be clearly showing over the skirt. I make sure to use a tiny amount of glue to adhere it to the body so that way it doesn't slide around and accidentally chafe off the paint over time. Even though Meg's initial armor design doesn't have chains on it, I did want to tie all the look together, so I decided to take some liberty and add chains to it. Using some black Crayola magic mold clay, I mold her knee protectors into the shape of a skull as per her design. After waiting 24 hours for it to dry, I go over it with some resin and some chrome powder. I use these wooden sticks that I found at the dollar store and I put them into a pencil sharpener so that I can create a spike, and then I cut it off so that these will become the spikes that are on top of her shoulder pads. The armor pieces of this doll follow the same recipe, which is basically paint it in resin, cure it, use a chrome powder, cure it, paint it in resin again to set it in, and that's basically it. I also made a third sculpt to add it to the side of her hip, and then I put a little bit of chain around it to just tie it all together. Finally, I secure the skirt in place using some Gorilla Glue. I feel like the chain effect really does level up the doll, so I went around with E6000 glue and the chain, adhering it to different parts of the armor. It seems like Meg has some cloth wrapped around both arms, so I of course go and do that with the same fabric I used before. One of her arms does have a metal protector on it, so I of course add some Worbla and do the resin gold chrome treatment to it. Before I start the hair, I of course seal her head up. Off camera, I did make some blue yarn wefts. I actually didn't find the correct shade, so I did change the color slightly using my pastel colors. Meg has an extremely high ponytail and I really wanted it to defy gravity, so I used this piece of a hanger in order to do that. I also do this so that way I can follow and glue the yarn wefts further down, so that way her hair will be really long. Meg has a gold armor on her ponytail, so I used some Worbla to just create that piece. She also has this additional piece onto her ponytail piece, so I just glue that on with some E6000 glue. To the forehead protector piece, I decided to add some resin to add some texture to it, and I also added this blue little jewel. Meg's armor piece also has some blue stripes on it, so I decided to use some plastic and put resin on it so that way I could peel it off and add chrome powder to the perfect shade and then glue it on back to the armor. For the golden wraps around her thighs, I decide to use this piece of ribbon and I glue it in place, and then I just go over it 1,000 times with resin and then chrome powder. For her earrings, I use a pin needle and I paint the end gold, and then I use some permanent glue and some toothpicks that I painted gold, and I glue them onto her ear. I wanted to give her long nails even though she doesn't have it. Again, this is a sexy version, so I just cut out thin pieces of plastic and I adhere them to her fingers using resin. Once adhered, I add some more UV resin and then I go over with some chrome powder. The wings were actually so hard. I had to do them 3 times, but the way I ended up doing it was I grabbed a black cardboard paper and I cut out the wing design, and then I went over it with UV resin and I used bits of masking tape to leave out cutouts so that I can carefully, very carefully, put on the chrome powder and then seal it again with UV resin so that way the chrome powder wouldn't blend into each other. Also decided to use a resin to give a raised texture to it so that way it would look like bone and it would just look a little less flat. Now that the wings are done, I just drill it straight into the doll and we're done. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Please check out everyone else's dolls. It all looks so amazing. And please like, follow, subscribe, comment if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching.